This is Joseph McBride, film historian, talking about Buster Keaton's Cops, which is the sixth of the films I'm discussing. This is probably his, I would say, his greatest short film, a real masterpiece of American cinema. It was released in March of 1922. It's very fitting that this film has an epigraph from Harry Houdini, who was partner of the three Keatons in vaudeville. They actually had a show for a while called the Keaton and Houdini Medicine Show. And Harry Houdini was the most famous escape artist of that time. And there's even a myth that he was present at the birth of Buster Keaton, which is probably not true. This opening, which is sort of a visual pun, showing him behind bars in the first shot, it turns out he's barred by class from this rich girl's estate, was filmed in Pasadena, where a lot of the rich people in LA lived in those days, and that gate is still in existence. Here's Joe Roberts, who was his sidekick in a lot of the films and always pushed him around on screen. Cops was picked for the National Film Registry. The Library of Congress has a list of what they consider national film treasures that they pick every year, and Cops was picked for that in 1997, which is quite a tribute. And it's really held in the highest regard by film historians as a perfect and very deep film. And for a comedy, it's extremely unusual because, as you'll see, it's got a totally tragic ending. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's not a tragic-comic ending. It's a tragic ending, which is really kind of surprising. The background of the film is you should know about the post-war Red Scare, post-World War I, with the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 and World War I. There was a lot of anxiety in America about radicals and anarchists, and the anarchist movement had been flourishing in Europe since the late 1800s. And so right around 1917, 18, 19, 20, there was a lot of agitation, labor unrest, and reaction by the government. The Attorney General Palmer had a series of what they call Palmer raids in 1919, 20 to arrest radicals, and they actually shipped some of them overseas, and it was a very repressive atmosphere, and there were anarchists who were sending mail bombs and throwing bombs, and in the 1890s there was a famous event, the Haymarket Square bombing in Chicago, where there was a labor rally at which somebody threw a bomb and killed 8 policemen, and that has echoes in Cops. So all this background would have been very familiar to the viewers of the time, because Cops came out in 1922, and so it's a comedy set against this very serious political situation, and it ridicules authority and sort of makes light of the whole situation of anarchists through the character of Buster Keaton, who's not political at all in the film, but he's just a regular guy trying to get by, who gets mixed up with the police. But the social content of this film is unmistakable. It's more overt than in most Keaton films. Chaplin's films had a very strong self-conscious social commentary, such as Modern Times, which is very much about labor unrest, but this is probably the most overtly social conscious Keaton film. I just want to point out that's Eddie Klein, the co-director of Cops, playing the hobo there. Klein was an actor as well as a director, and he would play these little parts for Buster Keaton. Keaton loved these sort of pyramiding gags where one thing would lead to another, and he would be very ingenious in topping situations. I love that gag where he hangs his hat on the spavined horse. In this situation where he just sort of stumbles into this thing with his family, shows his sort of innocence, and that's the Chaplin character in Modern Times is like that too. He gets into some very dodgy social situations without meaning to. He's not malevolent at all, but he's basically stealing all the property of his family without meaning to. So there's a certain kind of naivete to Keaton's social view, but it's there nonetheless. And this film sort of charts the evolution of somebody from an innocent person to an enemy of society, in a sense. And some of the Keaton biographers have tried to understand where this was coming from, and one of the theories that's been put forth is that Fatty Arbuckle, Roscoe Arbuckle, who was Keaton's good friend and mentor in comedy, was going through his trials at that time. In 1921, there was a episode at a party in San Francisco where a girl died, and Arbuckle was accused of murdering her, and it was a very lurid scandal that caused terrible upheavals for the film industry and forced the film industry to crack down on perceived vice and licentiousness, both on the screen and off screen. And this was a terrible ordeal for Buster Keaton because he was good friends of Arbuckle, who he thought was innocent, and always remained friends with Arbuckle. Arbuckle was tried 3 times. The first 2 trials resulted in hung juries. The third was an acquittal. And the third trial was underway at the time Cops was shooting. So some people have speculated that the rather critical view of the police and authority in this film stems from Keaton's anger at the way Arbuckle was being railroaded, and the bleakness of the ending of Cops has been interpreted as Keaton's commentary on the justice system, that there was no real justice for Roscoe Arbuckle, who wound up, even though he was acquitted, being blacklisted by the film industry because they scapegoated him to get the public off their backs, and so he could never appear before the camera again, but he was allowed to direct comedy films, and the industry supported him, and he used the name William Goodrich, or Will Be Good, as a joke, and Buster Keaton was helping finance Arbuckle's second career as a director, so he was very loyal to his friend. So that's sort of the background of this unusual socially conscious film that Keaton made. Keaton was very good with animals. He had a kind of rapport with animals, maybe from the vaudeville days, and also his basic innocence, kind of, he could relate very well to animals. And so in this one, he had fun with this horse, whose name was actually Onyx, and he wanted a sort of beaten down old horse for the film, and he had a gag that he wanted to do, which would have been very funny, that after all this byplay between him and the horse, where he's giving the horse instructions with the telephone and all this kind of stuff, he wanted finally himself to be pulling the wagon and the horse to be riding in the wagon. The horse just wouldn't do it. They couldn't figure out a way to get the horse to sit in the wagon. They had a crane trying to lift the horse, and the horse was kicking, getting very angry, and just wouldn't do it. And this was a Saturday, and they were on location, and they had to stop shooting, and Keaton was going to come into the studio on Monday and get a different horse. And when they arrived on Monday, they found out the horse had given birth to a colt, so that's why the horse wouldn't do the gag, because she was actually pregnant. So I guess if you look at the horse, you can tell. But it was a complete surprise to everybody. And Keaton, who loved puns, said the name of the colt would be Unexpected. So this would have been preceding the gag where the horse would be riding in the wagon, where the horse just refuses to pull any further. So he was having fun with the recalcitrant horse here. So here we have the recalcitrant horse, and Buster is going to find a solution to it that is missing from some prints of the film for some reason, but you'll see it here with the goat gland doctor. Buster is always coming up with some ingenious solution to whatever problem is thrown at him. Here the horse is losing his teeth. He's having a lot of fun with it. It's just like his problems with boats and trains and things. You can always figure out some way to deal with it, but this horse was a bit of a conundrum for him. A lot of this film was shot around downtown Los Angeles in the sort of Skid Row area of LA, and it's part of the charm of the film is there's a certain documentary feeling to a lot of the early comedy films because they were shot on the streets, and so you can actually see what LA looked like in those days. And there was a certain amount of studio shooting, but wherever possible they would be out on the streets actually filming real locations, which helps Keaton give the sense of reality that he liked to his comedy. It makes it more believable and anchors it in the real world. So when he does his fanciful things, it seems more plausible. So here again is a rather sarcastic title about the police department. Keaton's view of authority was somewhat anarchic in its tone, although unpretentiously so, but quite unmistakable. And here's some documentary footage to show big crowd scenes. When he'll intercut, this establishes the presence of a lot of policemen, but when he has his own policeman that he's using for his scenes, he shows his sense of economy and cleverness as a filmmaker by taking X number of policemen and multiplying them. I'll show you how he does that. It's quite clever. But meanwhile, he's still trying to get the horse to respond, and the horse will get him into trouble. So here is obviously a stage scene with his setup of policemen. I suppose you could freeze frame and count the number of policemen on screen at any one time, but what you tend to do as a filmmaker is to have the same people just go out of frame, maybe even go around the camera, come back into frame, cut to a different angle, use the same number of people, and so if you had 40 or 50 policemen, you could make it look like you have hundreds. So they keep coming and coming and coming in this setup with the frame and the viewing stand. So Keaton has innocently gotten himself into this trouble here, and you'll see he gets mistaken for an anarchist because there's an actual anarchist who is trying to disrupt this parade, just like the Haymarket Square bombing, which I'm sure the audience at the time would remember that today. People might not, but the first time I saw this, I was thinking, wow, that's really an interesting element to have this guy with an actual bomb throwing a bomb at this parade. That's something you don't expect in a comedy. It's like intrusion of the real world. But the way he handles it is very comical because he just picks it up and lights a cigarette with it and throws the bomb. So they think he's an anarchist because he's got this bomb. I love the way the policemen are just sort of keep dancing like that. Now this is sort of like in a cartoon where they're all kind of covered with soot and stumbling around, so they're not all dead. So, it would be harder to bear if people were actually being killed. It would take it out of the realm of comedy altogether. But this is one of the great chase scenes in silent films where Keaton does some wonderful things. Keaton and Eddie Klein, who deserves a lot of credit too for helping stage all these scenes. Wonderful use of crowds in relation to the solitary figure of Buster Keaton, who pops up with his umbrella. Reminds me of Magritte's paintings. Very surrealistic element to use something like an umbrella when it's not raining. So Keaton's acrobatic nature, which was finely developed on the stage, is really shown off to probably its best effect in this film. Some of the stunts he does are really pretty astounding. You'll see coming up here. And he was very proud of doing his own stunts. So you have the entire cast of cops, and then Keaton popping out of the garbage can, which again is sort of a surrealistic image. And this film is surrealistic, and it's sort of, you could think of it as a nightmare film about being in trouble with the police. If you have a bad dream about terrible things happening to you, this is kind of what it would look like, with hundreds of policemen chasing one guy. And it turns out that he's actually stolen the stuff from a policeman. Now this fascinating looking building was actually the USC, University of Southern California College of Dentistry. No longer exists. It was Exposition Boulevard in Los Angeles. So again, you see the actual streets of LA with the real cars, and filming in those days was a lot more casual, and you see one of the old LA streetcars, which is very nostalgic today. But there's a sense of semi-documentary feeling to the silent films. Here you see, up in the right-hand corner, you see a bunch of spectators watching the shooting up on a ledge. And this was filmed right near the LA County Hall of Records and LA County Courthouse downtown. So the orchestration of the visual images and the use of crowds and the chase is so beautifully timed and staged. Now this is a wonderful topper of a gag where you expect him to get away with it, and one cop thinks he's so clever he figures it out. He locks him in. Camera cuts closer to show it, and Keaton gets away anyway. I love the little interplay between them. Again, the documentary aspect of the film is very beautiful to watch with the shadows and the streetcars and the cars. This is shot on in Hollywood, right near Hollywood. It's on Cahuenga Boulevard, right near Hollywood Boulevard. The alley is still there, and that's a favorite gag of Keaton's, to grab onto a passing car or streetcar or whatever. He's just fantastic about the way he could latch onto something. Very dangerous stunt. Now look at this. I mean, this is just breathtaking, and all you can do with this is just watch and marvel at the acrobatic skill, but also the kind of geometric beauty of the direction, the imagination that went into conceiving a scene like this as part of a chase sequence is pretty amazing. Using the frame, bisecting the frame, and then having him just do his acrobatic feats, but in a way that's actually plausible because you actually see it happening. I mean, there's no camera trickery or anything like that. Silent films often would use sound effects that you could discern without hearing them, where somebody's rapping his nightstick on the ground. There's kind of a slightly hokey effect where you could see him sort of being pulled by the wire there. This is a classic image where there's just one little guy and there's hordes of cops, and he managed to get through. But look at this nightmare. It's sort of your worst nightmare of being in trouble. And then the frame clears again, and there he goes again, the opposite direction. Just wonderful. You know, as the policemen run in the police station, Buster eludes them. And yet, when the girl comes by, she snubs him again. Virginia Fox playing the girl. Now she snubs him because he's just a cop. So he basically gives up on life, which is a terribly shocking conclusion for an alleged comedy. And in a moment, you'll see his tombstone, implying in effect that he's committed suicide. Suicide by cop, as they call it now. In the movie College, a few years later, he has a similar ending. It's a love story, and he shows the tombstones of the couple at the end of the film, which is kind of pushing the limits of comedy. But this is that was more like a gag, but this is really dark and a really bleak way to end the film. It really shows you what a serious artist Buster Keaton really was. So that's one of the great films of the American cinema, Cops.